Hello, everyone, and welcome to Shannon Q. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please let me know if you can see us. Oh, I apologize for the delay. We had a little bit of technical difficulties getting on today, and unfortunately, those technical difficulties persisted for a little bit, and we aren't going to be able to see John during this conversation. So the only face you will see will be mine, but we do have
Hello, everyone.
John here. Welcome to Shannon Q. Thank you so much for feedback. So you will still be able to see my face, but you will not be able to see John's, but you will be able to hear both of us. And I forgot to mute my stream immediately after suggesting that John do that on his. So bad Shannon. So for those of you who aren't familiar, there's a series of links in the description to what I would suggest might be a controversy surrounding a convention that John is the organizer of in England. That's going to be happening in Brighton in April. I believe, John can correct me if I'm wrong, it's called the Anti-Theist International Convention. It has several speakers that were lined up, and one of the co-organizers, whose name was Lance Gregorchuk, was on David Worley's podcast a few weeks ago and made some less than favorable remarks, and there has been some repercussions for that that have echoed throughout the community. I've done a stream on it, and my friend Rachel has done a couple of videos on it, as has my friend Jimmy from Mr. Atheist. Haven't Met has written an article. John himself has done a response video. So I reached out to John through David, who was the person who did the original interview with Lance, that you can see in the links that are down below if you'd like to check out the chronology of what happened. And John was kind enough to accept to come have a conversation with me today regarding all of the goings on surrounding this and what we are going to do going forward. So thank you for joining me, John. If you'd like to let everybody know who you are and where they can find you, and then we'll go from there.
Hi. Well, thank you, Shannon, beg your pardon.
That's okay.
For inviting me to speak. And as you can see, oh no, you can't, can you? Sorry.
Nobody can.
My computer's not playing ball tonight.
It's okay, we can hear you.
Good. But yeah, here I am. I've got some great news, actually.
Oh, okay.
Can I give you my great news?
Certainly. We can start with good news, and we'll go from there. Then I have some questions. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, it's nice to have good news occasionally, isn't it? Because we've just had some very bad news here in the UK on election night. But let's not talk about that.
Fair enough.
So my really great, fabulous news is that UK National Treasure Stephen Fry has agreed to be one of the judges for the Anti-Theism International Convention competitions. As you may know, we have two competitions. One is for awards, and the other one is for an artist who will be commissioned to paint a portrait of Christopher Hitchens. And that comes with a prize and an invitation to the gala banquet. So Stephen has very kindly agreed. In fact, he chose to judge the painting competition. And also, this is not the end of the good news, Ian McEwan, world famous, multi-million book-selling author, and a couple of his books have made wonderful films. You may have heard of Atonement. That was a very big film. And another one was, I'm not going to be able to remember it now. Oh, Enduring Love. And Atonement was an Oscar winner featuring Keira Knightley. So he is also agreed to be on our judging panel, and he will be involved with judging the winners of the awards. He will be one of the judges that will be doing that. And as you know, with an awards system, you have nominees, and then they are whittled down until on the night itself, the final winner is announced. And so far, we have nominees from as far away as Australia.
Interesting.
So this is truly an international convention.
Very good. All right. So we've covered your good news. So now we need to have a bit of a difficult conversation. And I appreciate you agreeing to come and have that with me. It's not an easy thing to do. So as we know, there were some pretty questionable. I'm gonna err on the side of favorability here in discussing Lance statements. Questionable, I think, is more than favorable for him. Statements that he made while representing the conference. So these statements included some things that I'm going to paraphrase slightly, but they're readily available for anybody to view, and there's a link in the description. He said things like, it's easy to touch somebody's knee and then 14 years later that turns into up a skirt. I've done it. You've done it. We've all done it, dude. Like, haven't you ever had a mixed signal and touched a girl? Those sorts of things in response to a question regarding platforming Lawrence Krauss. And I don't want to really have a discussion about platforming Lawrence Krauss today, because what spun off of that were some, I think, and you can tell me the reasons why you might think I'm wrong, legitimate concerns regarding the climate of the conference and the atmosphere, and whether or not it is a place that anyone can go and feel comfortable and safe, that they would be taken seriously if something happened that made them uncomfortable or was questionable behavior. So as a result from that, there's been several videos and an article, as I referenced earlier, and you made a response to one of those, to Hemant Mehta's, and it seemed as though you said that Lance was fired as a result of his behavior. So my first question for you would be, what does it mean when you say Lance is fired? Does that mean that he's no longer in any way involved in the event itself and he's completely severed ties with the event, or does that mean he no longer holds a title?
He no longer has any responsibility within the organization.
So he is still involved with the event in some capacity?
No.
Oh, so he has utterly no involvement, not funding, not in any way organization. Is he going to be attending the event? He's no longer providing any funds for the event?
Well, I'm not at liberty to reveal the identity of my sponsors.
Okay.
And as far as attending the event is concerned, the attendance list hasn't been finalized yet. Of course, I mean, we've only had a website up for the last, I think, 3 weeks.
Okay.
And so, although we've so far got people coming from Italy, Germany, Canada, the US of A, the UK, naturally, Holland, and probably some other countries that I can't remember. The list of attendees is ongoing.
Okay.
And in any case, I wouldn't be entitled to, it would be very probably illegal for me to reveal any of the data that is on that list. We have something called GDPR in this country.
Oh, certainly. I wouldn't be asking you to reveal any of the data on that list. So what I'm hearing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that he would still be welcome at the event. He's not barred from attendance.
He's not barred from attendance, okay. But of course, everyone who attends the event, and that includes people who have bought tickets, that includes staff at the events, that includes the speakers at the event, and all the guests at the event will have to sign our safeguard policy. Okay,
perfect. So we're gonna go into the safeguard policy too. I actually have it so that I can put it up on the screen. But if it's okay with you, if you don't have any follow-up questions, I do have a couple more questions surrounding the controversy. So you did create what you've referred to as a safeguard policy for this event, but as it was being created or considered,
Sorry. Can I interrupt? Because
Yes, sure.
you froze.
Oh, did I? I'm so sorry. Am I on frozen now? I'll move back and forth a little bit.
Yeah,
Can you see me?
let me know. I had a little message come up saying my connection is unstable.
Oh, gracious. Okay. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's working fine.
Perfect. Okay. I'm glad you can hear me. Okay. So leading up to creating the safeguard policy, you made some references to why it was potentially necessary. And some of them seemed as though they were a bit derisive. And this is why I'm glad that you're here, so that you have the opportunity to let me know if this is something that I'm misreading, because it's entirely within the realm of possibility. But it seemed as though you gave the impression that you felt that this wasn't something that was necessary and potentially was a little bit silly, that it was deemed as a requirement, or that this was just, some sort of SJW reaction that you were having to respond to, as opposed to something that's reasonable and necessary. Would you think that that's a fair assessment, or is that a bridge too far? Is this something that you recognize the importance of?
That's a completely wrong impression, I'm afraid, Shannon.
Okay, I'm glad I asked then, because there's other people who've had that impression too. So I understand some of these questions may seem hard, and the reason is because you should be able to have the opportunity to get the record straight, and these are impressions other people have had also. Yeah.
Yes, I'm welcome you giving me the opportunity.
Wonderful.
The situation is that I don't condone any sort of misogynistic behavior. I certainly wouldn't want anybody to think that they're at risk of molestation. And I campaign on a more or less daily basis with my other hats on against the abuse of women, the abuse of homosexuals, it's worse in other countries. You all know this. For example, an adulteress, note, not an adulterer, in certain countries will get stoned to death. Right. And I certainly don't condone that sort of behavior, or any sort of abuse of women, or sexism of any kind. And I campaign, as you know, I'm not just doing this job. I'm a volunteer for the Alliance of Atheism International. And so we are very keen to improve the treatment of everybody, not just women, not just homosexuals, but humanity.
Wonderful. So I'm glad to hear that. That's fantastic. So do you think, in your estimation, that the reaction that was sparked from Lance's comments was a reasonable one?
Lance's comments were crass.
They were a little beyond crass, but yeah, okay. Well, but do you think the response to his comments was reasonable?
Yeah, whatever words you choose, I would agree with about Lance.
Okay, fair enough.
But that's why I fired him. That's why he's no longer playing a part in the organization. Right.
But do you think that the response was reasonable? Like videos like mine and Rachel's and Mr. Atheist, for example, do you think that those concerns were justifiable and reasonable concerns given the circumstances?
Some, yes, some and some.
Okay.
I have a beef with Hemant because he resorted to what I would call gutter journalism by cherry picking things off our website to give the worst possible impression.
Could you give an example? Oh, sorry, you were just about to do it.
I'll give you an example.
Wonderful.
For example, he announced that the price of attending the conference, the convention, was, and he did this to make it sound ludicrous, £699. He didn't mention that that's the, well, actually, he did say it was a VIP price, but he didn't mention any of the other prices. So the important thing to know here is that VIP means that you get 2 nights in a 5-star hotel. You get an after party. You get to attend all of the sessions or the gala banquet, and you get to have an after party in the King Suite, a champagne after party where you get to meet and greet the celebrity speakers. You get photo opportunities with them. You get their autographs on your books. That is the top of the range. It's really for the high rollers who want to attend this event.
Sure.
But if you and I want to go, Shannon, we could attend the entire weekend for £199. Or if we can claim to be a student or unemployed or a pensioner or disabled, any of the concessions, the price is £129
so this
for the whole weekend.
So this is interesting to me, and you're going to see why this is interesting to me in a second. I asked you if you had any critiques surrounding Hemmett's article, or to provide an example, and the example you provided was specifically about the price list for the conference tickets not being presented fairly. So from that, could it follow, since the subject of our conversation is the controversy surrounding this, that you felt that how he dealt with the controversy itself surrounding the comments that were made by Lance and the general and genuine concerns regarding safety policies and regulations that would be administered by and enforced by the conference, that those were all legitimate, and the critique more so had to do with details surrounding the conference itself?
Yes, I've already agreed with you on that.
Okay. No, I'm just giving you an opportunity to clarify that, because that's interesting to me.
Okay, you want me to agree again? Lance
no,
has been fired for his idiotic interview.
Right. Okay. No, it's not that I wanted you. It wasn't an attempt to elicit that. It was just that when you responded to him, there was some other things that you mentioned that you thought it seemed as though you thought that it was reactionary, that there was some sort of internet culture now that you were afraid was going to have a detrimental effect on the conference. You said, we live in this, social media world essentially, that, and you don't want that to detrimentally affect the conference. So I had assumed, perhaps falsely, that was something that was an impression you got from that article that maybe was something you might want to speak to. And when presented the opportunity, it wasn't spoken to. So that surprised me slightly, because it seemed like it was important to you. So it wasn't me attempting to elicit you letting me know that you have clearly established that you think that Lance did a really crappy thing. I think that nobody has reason to question you in this conversation regarding that. So I just want to make that clear, that was my motivation, so that you know what my honest intentions were. Is that fair?
Sure, fine.
Okay.
Listen, you and I are old hands at the internet. I'm an early adopter. I've had a computer since 1983.
Okay.
And as soon as it became possible to connect it to the rest of the world, I did that. And I've now got mega fast broadband. I get 100 megabits a second.
Wonderful.
So this is, fiber optics here.
Cool.
So, but you and I both know that social media can be a bit of a crazy place.
Yes.
I mean, for example, today, somebody said, I've got a punchable face, meaning me.
Yeah,
okay. And that she nearly broke her phone screen hitting it.
Yeah. See, I really wish people would not do those types of things. It's not productive discourse.
Exactly.
So I'm
now, if I had violent tendencies like that, I'd keep quiet about it. I wouldn't go on the internet and broadcast it to everyone. And to give you another idea of what sort of nonsense you can get on the internet today, I got an email that said, I'm entitled to a £10 voucher off beauty treatment.
Oh my gracious. Yeah, see, that those aren't great. That's not a great way to feel, right? You know, nobody likes to be put into a position where they feel, you know, unsafe or unwelcome. So I'm sorry that you've had that experience.
So I don't think you disagree with me if I said there's a lot of nonsense on the internet.
Certainly. So do you feel as though that internet nonsense is what contributed to the reason we're having this dialogue today, or you seem to be taking the concerns legitimately to a certain degree, because you have the policy that I'll bring up. But I have one more question before we start to discuss the policy. I watched your video to Rachel, and some people, including me, had critiques that it seemed to me, and again, I could be very incorrect about this because this would be reading your intent, but this was the impression that I got, and I don't know what your intentions were, and I could be wrong, which is why I wanted to ask. It seemed as though it was bordering on satirical, as though, you thought, this is a bit silly. We would have to have policies everywhere regarding behavior. Where does that start? Where does that end? Like maybe we would have to have written, maybe could it be verbal consent? And then you said, that would be discriminatory against the deaf. So maybe we'll have to put it in writing. And I do note that on your policy, it actually does now. It has either verbally or in writing added to it. So did I and others read that wrong when it seemed as though it was, kind of tongue in cheek? Or was that intended to be serious?
I think you've read a lot in between the lines there, Shannon. You
can correct me when I'm wrong.
Yeah, I'm impressed with the way you're being fair. Thank you.
No problem.
But let me tell you that our safeguarding policy has now been approved by the Anne Craft Trust, which is an organization that specializes in advising people about just that very thing, safeguarding policies. So they've today approved it as a very good example of the type.
Certainly.
So, but there is a wider problem here. It's not just the Atheist and the Anti-Theist International Convention that's involved in this sort of thing. I mean, for example, in January, I've been invited to Teesside University by the Muslim Society. Actually, it's called the Islamic Society, to give it its correct title,
Certainly.
To debate a Muslim. Now, in view of the recent incident on London Bridge, are you aware of that?
I'm not, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. No, I'm not.
Well, 2 people were stabbed.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's awful.
By a fundamentalist Muslim who had a fake, it was fake, but it was an explosive belt around him, and he was shot. Now, so I'm putting myself into the situation of debating a Muslim.
Certainly.
For the Islamic Society of Teesside University. Though, naturally, I'm interested in what sort of a safeguarding policy they've got.
Right.
Wouldn't you be?
Yes, most universities have a code of conduct on their website.
So I've inquired about their safeguarding policy. They're giving me a link to it, so I may read it for myself.
Yes, they have one, exactly. Yeah, precisely. They're very important. They're an important consideration.
So we want these things, and we want to spread them.
Wonderful.
We want every place to be safe.
Absolutely.
We certainly don't want to walk about feeling under threat, do we? I mean, give you another example. Last month, I was called upon to debate a Baptist Christian at the University of St Andrews in Scotland. And it was a very enjoyable experience. And afterwards, the students took me to the pub.
Yeah.
We just walked in. It was full of people, all different sorts of people, different ethnicities, different ages, different sexes. And I'm not saying just the 2,
Right.
And the thing that could be worrying is that there was no requirement to check any behavior policy, to accept any standards of how to behave. There was no safeguarding policy which we had to tick on the way in.
No, because most safeguarding policies don't operate like that. Generally, the onus is on the person who's entering the premises to make sure that they're aware of the regulations that premises operates under. Otherwise, it would be a really onerous task to expect everybody to sign a waiver before they enter a building. However, the people that operate that building are within their rights, so long as they have a policy that's available to essentially force people in the premises to adhere to that policy or be ejected from the premises. I was a bartender for a very long time. So, for example, if somebody became too inebriated, that was against the policy that we had. We would cut them off, and if they became belligerent, we would ask them to remove themselves from the space. That's a form of safeguarding policy, the same with inappropriate touching. I do want to get back really quickly to the question that I asked about your tone, because I really think it's important to clear that up. Because that is one of the reasons that people, I think, might be a little bit upset, is because they get the impression through the tone of some of the correspondences that you've made that you may see this as something that can be dealt with, tongue in cheek. And it could just be, and you said that I was reading into it quite a bit. Is it, and then we went off a little bit on a discussion about safeguarding policies, which is an important concept that we need to discuss, and we will right after this. But do you mind just kind of clearing up what your tone was intended to be with the response to Rachel, as well as the responses to Hemet, and where people may have misinterpreted and why you think that might be, because it seems to kind of be unilateral, and maybe there's a communication strategy that I can help you with or something.
I certainly didn't intend to belittle this issue.
Okay.
The trouble is, you see, we all bring our own preconceptions to internet interactions, don't we?
Yes, absolutely.
And we can read things into words that aren't intended to be there. There's a difference between broadcasting a message and receiving it. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can say something, maybe to a Christian, for example, that I don't mean to be offensive in any respect. But because perhaps it challenges their belief system, they take it as an offense, and they consider me to have insulted them. That's not the case. So we're all bringing our own prejudices, if you like, to every interaction.
Right. So you think it was an error on the part of the recipients who had read and listened to those messages in thinking that your tone wasn't one of seriousness, when in fact your intention was to have a tone of seriousness surrounding this.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's worse in writing, isn't it? Because there is no emphasis. There's no tone of voice at all there, is there? It's all how you read it yourself.
Okay.
And I put that stuff out as not intended to be trivializing the message at all.
Okay. I'm glad that you don't think it's trivial. That's what's important to me. I can't infer what your intentions are. I can't tell you I was one of the people that thought to myself that this seems is this that it might be an attempt at being satirical, but there could be lots of reasons for that. I respond with nervous laughter sometimes in incredibly inappropriate situations. So I've been subject to that criticism, and I can't imbue your intent, but it is something to think about going forward in situations like this. The tone of how something like this is dealt with when people are so very personally invested, and it's an emotional issue that's incredibly hard for a lot of people to deal with. That mitigating that tone is something of priority and importance, especially to protect yourself from backlash too, a little bit. Yes. So I hope you understand the question in the spirit that it's intended.
I do, yes, but okay. You see, I'm a retired science teacher, so if you like, the tone that I send out things in is dispassionate, objective. I use the words to mean their definition.
Okay.
I'm not trying to convey some hidden message.
Okay. All right. I was just wanted to clear up your intent, because that was something that a myriad of people were responding to, and we tend to just talk about details and things like this, but people's emotions, reactions, and interpretations are involved. So it's important for you to have the opportunity to clarify, and for others to have the opportunity to hear what you say, so that they can incorporate that into their future assessments. So thank you for answering the question. So yeah, thank you. And thank you for being here. So I am going to put your policy up on the screen. It's going to cover both of us. So now people are going to be able to hear us, but not see me either.
Right.
So
before you do that.
Oh, I just did, but I can take it back off. Yes, go ahead, John, please.
I wanted to just give you an example of somebody bringing their own baggage to my words.
Interesting. Okay.
Somebody today, I explained that we would have security guards that would inspect bags.
Right.
As you go in.
Yes.
Right? So somebody put up, have these security guards been selected by Lance in order to be, how favorable towards his sort of behavior? I mean, that is a completely nonsensical slant that has been put on by this person's brain who read my statement that there will be security guards. They won't be selected by Lance. They work for the university and the hotel. They're regular security guards. But that's the sort of idiotic comment that comes up.
Interesting. Okay. Fascinating. Well, for a moment there, I thought that you might have been insinuating that my interpretation may have been idiotic, but I think that you were just using that as an extreme example.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah, which does make sense. That's an extreme example. I don't think that the concerns that I brought up are necessarily an extreme example. They're more just a tonal example, taking into consideration that these are interpersonal issues.
Granted. No, you've not been extreme in the slightest. I'm just pointing out how weird some responses are on the internet.
Oh, but listen, I got a YouTube channel. I get it. Do I ever?
But listen.
Sure.
If you say anything idiotic, I will say, Shannon, that's idiotic.
Oh, I don't doubt that at all, John. I have a feeling that you would let me know right away that I was being just foolish. So I am going to put up the policy now, and you said that this policy was signed off on. So okay. we'll have a little chat about the policy, because that's the important thing is going forward.
As I said, it's being approved.
Wonderful. Okay, so it is up, so people can see it now. And the first thing it says is no knives or other sharp implements being brought into the venues, which. That kind of goes without saying. Bags will be searched by security guards who were not selected by Lance Gregorchuk, obviously.
Indeed.
Now, all physical interaction between individuals is to be entirely previously arranged consent, either verbally or in writing. All attendees are responsible for their own and each other's safety, and these rules apply to all participants at the convention. So this is, unless I'm mistaken, this is the entirety of the policy that I found. It looks like it went up just a couple of days ago. If I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Yes, it did go up.
Wonderful.
More recently, because of course the website wasn't finished at the moment it was launched.
Okay.
There will be further changes. I mean, I've also put up today that Stephen Fry and Ian McEwen are part of our judging team. So there will be further changes to the website.
Right.
It wasn't fixed in stone the moment it was launched. But the other thing I want to say is that that's the website page version of the safeguarding policy.
Okay.
There will be a much longer, you're familiar with terms and agreements, aren't you? The conditions that
Yes.
that rattle by on the screen, and then you put a tick in at the bottom without reading them.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yep. They'll put one of those
Okay.
at the entrance to the venues for all of the participants to check.
Okay. So if I'm reading your implications correctly, are you saying that you had this safeguarding policy all ready to go and it was just placed on the website a few days ago, but is something that was being implemented prior to this?
It was developed. The final website version did only go up a couple of days ago, but prior to that, I had a draft version of just a few bullet points, and prior to that, I had a notification that we had a no touching policy. So the thing is developing.
Wonderful. Okay. So I'm glad that you're
frozen again.
Oh, am I? Is it on my end or yours? I think I'm looking okay on my screen. So
sorry, you froze again.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Yes,
me
I
now?
can.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good, John. I'm glad you can hear me now. So
Did you hear what I said?
yes, what I heard you say was that it's something that's essentially still being implemented. So, it's still the tires are still kind of being kicked on it.
Yeah, sure.
And that's the reason that it's gone up recently. But it is something that you're taking as a priority, based on the tone. And
I can't do everything at once.
Sorry?
I can't do everything at once.
That's fair, certainly. I'm glad it's something that you're perceiving as important. So what are the plans should anybody deviate from this policy? So how is it being implemented?
Well, I think if you read further down the safeguarding policy, you'll see
that was literally all I could find yesterday. Is there more today than there was yesterday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
There's additional paragraphs.
That was it yesterday.
All right, no, sorry, you're out of date.
I'm out of date. Yes, that was almost 24 hours ago.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
there's additional paragraphs which explain what to do if you feel you're under threat or harassment, what to do if you see somebody else that you think is, being harassed, who to tell, how we will get the guards and the police involved, and if necessary, and how we will interview all those involved in any incidents, and so on and so forth.
Okay. All right. So I'm glad to hear that it's something that's in development. So, and I'm glad to hear that it's something that you take seriously.
Well, Shannon, I've been, for years, I've been involved in campaigning against all sorts of misogyny. This is not something that's new to me or something that I take lightly. It's been a mission.
Okay. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. And I have just, one, maybe two more questions for you. And then there are a couple super chats that I have to read off. I shouldn't say have to. That's horrible phrasing. See how important communication is?
Absolutely.
Have to read off. Isn't that awful? I misspoke. I'm glad for my audience that I have the opportunity to correct that. So, because I understand how the people that donated to me, how that would make you feel when I say have to read off, that I will have the pleasure to read off.
Use your words carefully, Shannon.
Yes, exactly. It's incredibly important when you deal with the public.
There's dozens of people out there wishing to dissect every syllable.
There certainly are. And also there's people that are listening to us. We have platforms, right? We're making places where people can congregate. There's a power in that's incredibly important that we need to respect.
Absolutely.
And,
yes, I can tell you something about a platform which I'm about to start in January. This is on behalf of AAI, the Atheist Alliance International, which is I'm a director, I'm a volunteer for that. And we have a Pathos channel that will begin in January, where we will be doing half-hour shows, interviewing people like you, perhaps.
Interesting.
If you would be so kind as to agree to come on.
I'll think about it, because there's you guys have some stuff going on with the Yeah. So I will take it under consideration, and I appreciate the invitation. Thank you very much. So a couple more questions. I guess potentially second to last question that I have for you is, since this all started with, Lance and his comments and kind of snowballed from there, are there any important lessons that you took from this that you may take into consideration going forward?
Yes, I think the main lesson is not to get involved with somebody who is obviously an undesirable misogynist. I wasn't aware of this. I've known Lance for about 5 years, but only fairly remotely, because he's in Germany and I'm in the UK. Mm-hmm. And it came as a shock to me that he could interview so inappropriately. Mm-hmm. So he's gone, and I shall be very careful about who I associate with in future.
Okay, fascinating. And the last question I have for you before I read Super Chats is so that you can demonstrate the deference and show people how a question like this maybe should have been answered as opposed to answered in a monumentally inappropriate cluster bomb of a way, is, given the allegations, do you think that it is okay to platform somebody like Lawrence Krauss?
Well,
since that's where it all started, right?
Okay. Well, you use the word allegations. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't present when the incidents occurred, and I don't suppose that you were. So what we have here is allegations, and let me give you another example. Aung San Suu Kyi, you may think this is irrelevant, but you'll get to the point in a minute, is currently being heard in the International Court in The Hague because she's been charged with being responsible for the genocide of the Rohingyas in Myanmar. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not, no.
No? Well, it's all over the news here. Now, I would like to ask you whether you believe she is guilty or not.
I would have to have a look at some of the information surrounding it before I could even attempt to make an assessment regarding my opinion on the situation.
So, to press it a little further, do you think you're qualified or competent to answer the question, is she guilty or not?
Do I think I'm qualified to...
Or competent?
Or competent. I believe that I'm competent. So are you asking if I have the aptitude to assess evidence and come to a determination as to...
Not really. No, I'm asking whether you are in possession of the evidence to be able to make the judgment.
I just said that I am not in possession of the evidence, and thus I refuse to make a determination because it would be unreasonable.
That's a very good answer, Shannon. Mm-hmm. That's exactly how I feel.
I get a cookie. Cookie for Shannon. Good answer. Sorry, go ahead.
Chocolate chips? You fancy?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. Give me one. Certainly. Yeah. So where are you going? Where are you going with this one? Let's hear it.
Well, how you feel about Aung San Suu Kyi is exactly how I feel about Lawrence Krauss. I don't know. I'm not qualified. I'm not a judge. I haven't been trained. I have no access to the information. What we have here is allegations, not charges, not convictions. And I don't want to live in a world where allegations are taken as a conviction.
Okay. So if I'm hearing you correctly, after we walked our way through the analogy, is that you feel that it's okay to do so because you don't have access to the information that would be required in order for you to come to a determination as to whether or not they are true or false. So it's best to continue on as though they are false, as opposed to assuming guilt of him, to give him the benefit of the doubt in those situations, since you either, what are the words you used, competent or qualified to determine that yourself.
Well, I'm not a judge, and until a judgment has been pronounced, a man is innocent, a woman is innocent.
Okay.
Allegations are not convictions.
Okay. Well,
in any case, as an attendee at the International Anti-Theism International Convention, all people, including Lawrence, will have to sign our safeguarding policy.
Okay. I appreciate you answering the question, and I appreciate you coming on. I'm going to take a moment and delightfully read my super chats with fervor and vigor and thank you, as opposed to whatever I said before. I apologize. All right. So the first one is from Lloydie. Hi, Lloydie. Godless money for you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. The second is from Dave. Oh, Dave has a question for you. Does he believe he is making his position clearer? That is a wonderful question, Dave. Do you feel as though the opportunity to have a conversation here today has helped to clarify your position?
Definitely. I thank you for it.
I appreciate you coming. It's not an easy topic to discuss. And I hope you feel that you were heard and that I was fair and reasonable with you. All right. So Nervardia. Hi, Nervardia. Sending you money so that you have money. Logic. Good logic. Thank you. Now I have money. So thank you for that. Paulogia. Why a teddy bear? I think that is for you, in reference probably to the pig teddy in the video that you made to Rachel.
Yeah, sure. Rachel, I don't know if you watched many of her videos.
She's one of my good friends, so yes, absolutely, I support my friends.
so you know that she has a giant teddy bear in shot?
I listen to her more than I watch because I'm usually at work, and I'm not super astute at picking up on surroundings. So I believe you when you say she does, because teddy bears are adorable, so why wouldn't she? So yeah, sure, okay. I can't see reason to disbelieve you.
And so are cuddly pigs. Adorable.
Okay, so it was sort of a tangential reference to the fact that amongst all of the things in the background of her shot, you narrowed in on the teddy bear and opted to use that in your own in order to reference the fact that she had one in her shot.
Well, it wasn't tangential. I referred to the fact that she had one in her shot.
Okay, so you found that to be something intriguing or interesting or in some way special regarding her shot and opted to use it in your own video.
Well,
directly responding to her.
I perhaps rashly assumed that she likes cuddly toys and that she might...
Oh, John, be careful, because... You're essentially saying, because that could be interpreted as you saying she liked, it could be interpreted and likely will be by people. I need you to be aware of this, that what you could be saying is the girl who was responding to me likes fluffy animals, so I brought one on the frame with me.
Oh, come on, that's a stretch.
It's something that people will potentially say. So these are all things that are worth you taking into account when you make these decisions. Because
these are people with amazingly suspicious minds, aren't they?
People are pattern seeking, and that's not an unreasonable inference.
What are they saying? Are they saying it's all right for Rachel to have a cuddly toy, but it's not for me?
No, actually, they would be saying that it's absolutely all right for Rachel to have a cuddly toy and for you to have a cuddly toy. But if you were using it as a prop in a video in order to be derisive or because you see that as either effeminate or childlike, that you would have made that choice potentially as, kind of a jab because she is a girl and you wanted to point out an effeminate or childlike characteristic in the video as opposed to any of the other characteristics of the video.
Well, they bring that to the conversation, not me, Shannon. Let me give you another example. Somebody in Rachel's thread today said, why did you think it was appropriate to wear a dress like that for a subject like this?
That's a horrible thing to say.
Yeah, and she was wearing a low-cut dress. And this person, whoever, thought that if she was, in favor of being treated reasonably, like a person, rather than...
I'm in favor of being treated like a person. All the time,
We're all in favor of being treated like a person.
Certainly are, yeah.
He was pointing out that in some respects she might be, and I'm making an implication here, perhaps he was pointing out that in some respects she might be presenting herself as an object.
That's his problem.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go back to Super Chats. Thank you for walking through that with me. All right. So the next is Narvardia again. Hello, Narvardia. Agree with Paulogia. Why the teddy bear? We just discussed that. So Vagrant Sam, you have to read this, Shannon. I do. I have to read that. Dragnaut. Hot dogs are not... Yeah, actually, I'm on his team. All right. Dragnaut says hot dogs are not sandwiches, and he is correct. He's doing this probably to make sure that my Twitter is a nightmare for the rest of my life. This is a running joke on my Twitter. Yeah, you wouldn't know, John, that hot dogs aren't sandwiches.
You've completely lost me now.
Yeah, don't wade in. It's not worth it. It's absolutely not. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. It's constant hell that I live in every day on Twitter. Hot dogs are sandwiches to me. All right. So Quem98 has the last super chat. Are you familiar with Jennifer Freyd's work on betrayal trauma, Darvo, and institutional courage? It pertains directly to this conversation. I am not, but that sounds like something that would be intriguing to look into. When I find time, I will have a look into that later. So that's all my super chats. I appreciate you meeting with me today to have a conversation, John. Do you have any comments for me or critiques for me or my line of questioning that I can take on board or assess so that I can make sure that you felt as though you were treated fairly and in accordance to the agreement that you and I made going into this conversation?
You were very fair, Shannon. Tell me, what are you doing for Christmas?
Christmas, I share custody of my son. I have joint custody with my ex-husband. Christmas Eve, I will actually be by myself. I don't get my son. It's my ex-husband's year to have him in the morning. So my 8-year-old will be coming to my house at around 2, and then it's fairly busy visiting family until he goes back. So my Christmas revolves around making sure that everything's prepared for him when he gets here. That's what I'm doing on Christmas.
So are you in the kitchen?
Well, I live alone, so if I'm not in the kitchen, then people aren't going to eat. He's 8, so he doesn't cook yet. May I get the context and relevance?
Well, I was going to invite myself to your table.
Oh, well, okay. I'm not sure where to go from there. Just interesting way to end a stream where we discuss misogyny, asking your host if she's gonna be in the kitchen. That was a solid choice. Okay, so I am going to end the stream, and again with a thank you, and all of the relevant links are in the description, and I am looking forward to reading the live chat afterwards, and also the comments that you guys are going to leave. As always, please be respectful to each other in your dialogue. Stick to the comments. Stay away from personal attacks. We want to have more constructive and important conversations and less vitriolic and non-productive conversations. So if you could all have that respect for one another, I'd appreciate it. Some of you won't, and that kind of is what it is. And as always, to everyone, thank you, and please help elevate the discourse. Bye, guys.